All your inheritance turned into an abandoned ranch. But a hidden secret changed everything. Sarah Mitchell received the news through a manila envelope that arrived without warning. The grandfather she barely knew had left his entire inheritance to her, and only her. The initial excitement lasted only until the moment the lawyer explained, with a pitying half-smile, that the inheritance consisted of a completely abandoned ranch in the countryside. When she finally managed to reach the place, after 3 hours by bus and another hour riding in the bed of an old pickup truck, what she found made her stomach turn. There was no house, but rather the rubble of something that might once have been a residence. The weeds grew so tall she could barely see where the property ended. The wooden gate hung from a rusty hinge, and there was no sign of electricity, running water, or any basic infrastructure. "You're Mr. Arthur's granddaughter?" A rough voice came from behind her. Sarah turned around, startled. A man in his early 40s was watching her with his arms crossed. He had sun-beaten skin, and a look she couldn't tell was curiosity or hostility. "I am. And you are?" "Ryan Mitchell. Your cousin. Son of your grandfather's brother." She didn't know she had cousins. In fact, she knew almost nothing about her father's side of the family. Her father had disappeared when she was a child, and her mother never talked about his relatives. "Nice to meet you," Sarah replied without much conviction. "Look, I'm going to be straight with you. This place here isn't worth anything. Dry land, no water, nothing. I'll do you a favor and buy it from you for $5,000. You take the money and go back to the city without any headaches. $5,000. Sarah had debts that added up to almost twice that amount. She had sold practically everything she owned before coming, hoping this inheritance would be something that could change her life. But something about her cousin's eagerness, the way he'd already started offering money before even a proper greeting, set off an alarm inside her. "No, thank you. I'm keeping it." Ryan's face shut down completely. "You're going to regret this. This place only brings trouble and losses. But fine. When you get tired of struggling, you come find me. The offer won't last forever." He left without saying another word, leaving Sarah alone in that sea of weeds and destruction. She walked through the property, tripping over stones hidden by the vegetation, until she reached the remains of what had once been the house. The walls were still partially standing, but the roof had collapsed almost completely. Inside, everything smelled of mold and abandonment. There were broken furniture covered in dust, pieces of dishware scattered across the dirt floor, and a silence that weighed on her shoulders. Sarah sat on a rock and let the tears fall. What had she done? She had bet everything on this inheritance, and now she was here with no money to go back, no place to stay, nothing. That first night was one of the worst of her life. She managed to gather some boards that seemed sturdy and created a minimally protected space in a corner of the ruined house. The cold was intense, and every noise made her jump in fright. Were there snakes? Scorpions? She didn't even want to think about it. In the morning, she woke up with her whole body sore and terribly thirsty. That's when she realized she had no water. Absolutely none. She looked around and saw at a considerable distance what appeared to be a well. When she got there, she almost gave up on everything. The water was dirty, with slime on the edges, and it smelled bad. "Can't drink this," she murmured to herself. But she needed water to at least wash herself. She grabbed an old bucket she found near the well and pulled the water up with a rope that looked 100 years old. Every movement was an effort, and she wasn't used to heavy physical work. While washing her face with that icy, murky water, she thought about her friends back in the city. What would they be doing right now? Probably heading to work, complaining about traffic, grabbing coffee at some bakery. Normal things. Things that now felt like a distant luxury. She spent the next 3 days trying to clean the house. Every corner revealed more destruction, more dirt, more evidence that the place had been abandoned for many years. Her hands became covered in blisters, her clothes tore in several places, and she started developing a cough from all the dust. On the 4th day, her cousin came back. This time he wasn't alone. "Sarah, this is Mr. Brooks. He's a lawyer." The man was older, wore a suit despite the absurd heat, and carried a brown leather briefcase. "Miss Mitchell, I've come here to clarify an important matter." It turns out there are documents proving that a significant portion of this land belongs to Mr. Ryan here by family right. The division of the inheritance was not done correctly." "What do you mean?" Sarah felt the ground give way beneath her feet. "The will left everything to me." "Yes, but there are matters that precede the will, old documents that establish rights that cannot be ignored. I suggest you seek legal counsel. For now, I'll leave a copy of the papers for your review." Sarah took the documents with trembling hands. It was all written in legal language she could barely understand. Stamps, signatures, old dates. It could be true, or it could be a lie. She had no way of knowing. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. After they left, Sarah sat on the floor and tried to process what was happening. She had no money to hire a lawyer. She barely had enough money to eat. Her savings were gone, and she had sold everything before coming. She had bet it all on this inheritance, believing it would be her salvation. And now it seemed like even that was going to be taken from her. She was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't notice someone approaching until she heard a shrill voice. "You have the nerve to show up here." A short, plump, elderly woman with white hair pointed her finger at Sarah, fury burning in her eyes. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. Who are you? Don't play dumb with me. Your grandfather owed my family money, a lot of money, and now you're going to pay." "My grandfather? But I never even really knew him. I don't know anything about any debts." "Well, you should. $3,000. He borrowed it and never paid it back, and now I want it back with interest." "I don't have that money. I don't have any money." "Then sell that piece of junk land and pay me." The woman stormed off, stomping her feet, leaving Sarah even more desperate. Debts she didn't know existed, cousins showing up out of nowhere with documents, and there she was, alone, with no idea what to do. That night, she began searching the house more systematically. If she was going to lose everything anyway, at least she wanted to understand what had happened. Who was this grandfather she never knew? Why did he leave everything to her and not the rest of the family? She was rummaging through a pile of rotten wood in what must have once been the living room when she felt something different under her feet. The floor sounded hollow in one specific spot. Using a plank as a lever, she managed to pry up some floorboards. Underneath, wrapped in old torn plastic, was a wooden box. Her heart raced. With trembling hands, she pulled the box out. It was heavy and had a small rusty padlock that gave way with a strong tug. Inside, there were letters, many letters, all yellowed with age, and documents, papers full of stamps, signatures, numbers she couldn't understand. She began reading the letters, trying to decipher the old, shaky handwriting. "My dear Arthur, we can't go on like this. They know. They know everything. We need to act before it's too late. Arthur, the documents you kept are our only chance. Don't lose them. They're proof of everything." Sarah spent the whole night reading, trying to piece together the puzzle. Her grandfather had been partners with someone. There were mentions of land, of business deals, of something that had gone terribly wrong, but the details were vague, fragmented. By morning, she was exhausted, but determined to understand more. She needed to show it to someone who could explain. Without thinking much, she put the documents in an old bag and went to the city to find her cousin. Maybe it was naivety, maybe desperation, but when she showed the papers to Ryan, his reaction was immediate and violent. "Where did you find this?" he nearly shouted, trying to snatch the bag from her hands. "It was at the house. They're my grandfather's documents. This isn't just yours. It belongs to the whole family. Give it to me." He yanked it hard, tearing the bag. Papers fell to the floor. Sarah quickly bent down to pick them up, but Ryan was faster in grabbing some. "You don't know what you're doing," he said, with an expression she had never seen before. Fear. He was afraid. "Give those papers back and forget you ever saw anything." "Why? What's in those documents?" "Nothing that concerns you. Just sell me that land and go away. It's better for you." But now Sarah was sure there was something important there. She gathered the papers she could and ran off, leaving Ryan yelling behind her. She went back to the ranch and hid the documents in a different place, burying them inside an old can she found. Then she improvised a lock on the door using wire and wood. It wasn't much, but at least she'd know if someone tried to get in. That night every noise made her wake up scared. What if her cousin came to steal the documents? What if he brought other people? She was completely alone out there, with no close neighbors, no working phone. When dawn came, she decided to go to the city to try to understand more about her grandfather. Someone must remember him. Someone must know something. The local general store was small, with overflowing shelves and the smell of cured cheese in the air. The owner, a woman around 60, watched her with curiosity. "You're new around here." "I'm Arthur Mitchell's granddaughter. I inherited his ranch." The woman stopped what she was doing and looked at Sarah closely. "Oh my goodness, you look just like him when he was young, the same eyes." "Did you know my grandfather?" "I did. Everyone around here knew him. Your grandfather was very respected back in the day. But then that whole thing happened and he disappeared. No one ever saw him around here again." "What thing?" The woman looked around as if checking whether anyone else was listening. "Look, I don't know the details. I was a kid back then. But my father used to say there was a big mess involving land, documents, that kind of thing. Your grandfather got mixed up in something and had to leave. They said he knew things he wasn't supposed to know. Do you know where I can find someone who remembers better? Someone who was his friend?" "There's old Mr. Walter. He's almost 90, lives up the street in the blue house. If anyone knows anything, it's him." Sarah thanked her and went looking for the house. She found a very old man sitting on the porch, with wrinkled skin and half-closed eyes. "Old Mr. Walter." He took a while to react, but when he saw Sarah, his eyes widened. "Arthur," he murmured. "No, sir. I'm Sarah, his granddaughter." "Ah, the granddaughter. He talked about you, you know. He said you'd come back here one day. Were you my grandfather's friend?" "I was. Great friend until the day everything fell apart." "What happened?" The old man sighed deeply. "Your grandfather and another man, Gerald, were partners. They had a small company that traded land. It was honest work. They helped families get their paperwork in order, things like that. But then a group of men from the state capital showed up. They offered your grandfather and Gerald a lot of money to sign some papers. They didn't really understand what they were signing. They trusted them. It was the biggest mistake." "What was in those papers?" "Property transfers for several pieces of land in the region. But they weren't their lands. They belonged to other families. The documents were fake, but with your grandfather's and Gerald's signatures, they looked legitimate. By the time they discovered the scam, it was too late. Several families lost their land. And my grandfather. He was devastated. He tried to prove he'd been tricked, but no one believed him. They said he was an accomplice. Gerald disappeared. No one ever saw him again. And your grandfather left soon after, but before he did, he told me something." The old man paused, as if reliving painful memories. He said he had kept copies of all the real documents, that one day he would prove the truth, but he never came back. Sarah felt a chill. The documents she had found. Could these be them? "Old Mr. Walter, do you know who those men from the state capital were, the ones who pulled the scam?" "I don't remember all the names, but I know they were important people, and that after that scam, they ended up owning a lot of land around here. Land that's worth a lot of money nowadays." When she got back to the ranch, Sarah's head was spinning. Everything was starting to make sense. Her cousin wanting to buy the land for next to nothing, the hidden documents, the fear she had seen in his eyes. But before she could process it all, she saw movement on the property. There were people there, 3 men she didn't know, all wearing work clothes and carrying equipment. "What are you doing here?" One of them, the tallest, answered without looking at her. "We work for Mr. Ryan. He sent us to fence off the land." "What do you mean, fence it off? This is mine." "We just follow orders, miss. He said he has rights to the land and told us to protect it." "Protect it from who?" "From me." "Look, we don't want any trouble. We just work here." Sarah tried to argue, but it was useless. They were being paid and they weren't going to stop. She watched, powerless, as they began installing a makeshift fence around the property. She ran to the spot where she had hidden the documents. They were still there, thank goodness. She grabbed everything and hid it inside her clothes, then headed back to the city, this time looking for the county clerk's office. "I need certified copies of these documents," she told the clerk. The woman looked at the papers carefully. "These documents are very old. I'll need the notary to look at them before I can certify anything." Half an hour later, the notary, a middle-aged man with thick glasses, called Sarah into his office. "Where did you get these documents?" "They were my grandfather's. I inherited his ranch and found them hidden away." "Do you know what these papers are?" "Sort of. I know it has to do with land." The notary took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Look, I'm going to be honest with you. I can't certify this. I can't, and I won't." "Why?" "Because these documents could cause a lot of problems. For a lot of important people, my advice is that you forget you ever saw this and move on with your life." "But they're legal documents. They were kept safe." "Maybe they are. Maybe they aren't. It's not my responsibility to verify. I'm sorry, but I can't help you." Sarah left the county clerk's office feeling defeated. No one wanted to help. Everyone was either afraid or involved in some way. She was walking back to the ranch. It was almost dark when a car pulled up beside her. It was an old pickup truck, and the driver was a man around 60 with grey hair and calloused hands. "You're Arthur's granddaughter, aren't you?" Sarah took a step back, wary. "Who's asking?" "Easy there, girl. I used to work for your grandfather. My name is Joseph. When I found out you had arrived, I kept thinking about whether I should come talk to you or not." "What do you want?" "I want to help. I saw what Ryan is doing to you. It's not right." "And why do you want to help?" "Because I owe it to your grandfather. He gave me work when nobody else would. He treated me with dignity. And because I know he wasn't a crook, no matter what everyone says." Sarah looked the man in the eyes and saw sincerity there. "What do you know about the documents?" "I know your grandfather hid something important at the ranch. He told me shortly before he left. He said it was proof that he was innocent. But he never told me where it was." "I found it. I found documents. Lots of documents." Joseph nodded slowly. "So that's why Ryan is desperate. He must have found out through the old rumors. Can you help me figure out what to do with them?" "I can try, but first you need a safe place to stay. It's not safe for you to sleep at that ranch alone right now." "I don't have money for a hotel. My sister has a small room in the back of her house. Nothing fancy, but it's clean and safe. You can stay there while we sort this out." Sarah didn't have many options. She accepted the offer. Joseph's sister, Mrs. Eleanor, was a kind woman in her 50s. She prepared a hot meal for Sarah, who hadn't had a decent meal in days. "Eat, dear. You're too thin." While she ate, Sarah told Joseph and Eleanor the whole story. She showed some of the documents she had brought with her. Joseph examined everything carefully. "This is dynamite. If it's true, it proves there was fraud in dozens of land transfers. Entire families lost their properties. But what do I do with it? Nobody wants to help me. The county clerk refused to authenticate it." "That's because everyone is afraid. The people who ended up with these lands are powerful now. They built fortunes on top of what they stole. So there's no way." "I didn't say that. But you'll need more than willpower. You'll need courage and a lawyer who isn't afraid to take on big shots." "Do you know someone like that?" Joseph thought for a moment. "Maybe. There's a lawyer in the next town over, Mr. Stephen. He's known for taking difficult cases nobody else wants, but it'll cost a lot." "I don't have money." "Some lawyers work for a percentage. If you win the case, he gets a share. If you lose, he gets nothing." It was a light at the end of the tunnel, even if a small one. The next day, Joseph took Sarah to the next town over. Mr. Stephen's office was simple, in an old building downtown. The secretary received them with a certain coldness, but when Joseph explained it was about land fraud documents, she made them wait. Mr. Stephen was younger than Sarah expected, maybe 40, with a tired look but alert eyes. He heard the whole story without interrupting, examining the documents Sarah brought. When she finished, he was silent for a long time. "Do you understand the gravity of what you're showing me?" he finally said. "I think I do." If these documents are authentic, and I believe they are, this could rewrite the land ownership history of this entire region. We're talking about dozens of families who lost everything unjustly. So you can help me? I can, but I need to be honest with you, this is going to be a war. The people involved will do anything to stop it. They'll threaten you, they'll try to buy you off, they'll try to destroy you. I have nothing left to lose. We all have something to lose, Sarah, but I understand your point. I'll take the case, but with one condition. I keep 20% of everything that gets recovered, and you need to promise me you won't give up, no matter what happens. I promise. Then let's get started. But first, I need all the documents, all of them. And we need a safe place to keep them. Sarah hesitated. Trusting someone she had just met with something so important went against every instinct she had. But what else could she do? There are more documents hidden on the ranch, many more. Then let's go get them today. They drove back to the region, but as they got near the ranch, they saw that things had gotten worse. Now there was a fully installed barbed wire fence, and 2 men were standing guard at the gate. We won't be able to get in, Sarah said, desperate. Mr. Stevens studied the situation. Yes, we will. This is your property, established by the will. They have no legal right to keep you from entering. I'll call the police station. No, Sarah grabbed his arm. Please, no police. My grandfather always had trouble with authorities because of this whole story. I don't trust them. Sarah, sometimes we need the law on our side. Please, there has to be another way. Joseph spoke up. I know those guards. They work for whoever pays the most. Let me try talking to them. He got out of the car and walked to the gate. Sarah couldn't hear the conversation, but she saw Joseph gesturing and the guards shaking their heads. After about 15 minutes, Joseph came back. They won't let anyone in. Ryan paid them well and told them to keep everyone out until the court decision. Court decision? Sarah felt panic rising. He filed a lawsuit contesting the will. He got a temporary injunction claiming irregularities. You have 15 days to prove you're the rightful heir, or you lose everything. Mr. Stevens slapped the steering wheel. That bastard is quick, I have to admit. But we can reverse this. Sarah, do you have a copy of the original will? I do. The lawyer who contacted me left a copy with me. Great. We'll request the injunction be overturned and file a lawsuit for trespassing. But first, we need those hidden documents. They're buried. Only I know where. Then we'll have to go in at night. We have no choice. The idea of breaking into her own property seemed absurd, but it was the only option. They waited for it to get completely dark. Joseph knew the area and knew a spot where the fence was less watched. Over there, he pointed to a denser wooded area. We can get through without the guards seeing us, but we'll have to go on foot, and it's far. They started walking through the darkness. Sarah kept tripping, not used to walking on uneven ground in the dark. Mr. Stephen wasn't in much better shape. Joseph, used to the countryside, led the way. It took them over an hour to reach the spot where Sarah had buried the can with the documents. She dug with her bare hands, desperate, until she felt the cold metal. Found it! Quick, let's get out of here before anyone notices. But as they were heading back, they heard voices. The guards, probably making their rounds. Get down, Joseph whispered. They crouched in the darkness, barely breathing, while flashlight beams passed nearby. Sarah clutched the can to her chest, praying they wouldn't be discovered. After minutes that felt like hours, the voices moved away. They continued their escape, now even more hurried. When they finally reached the car, they were all dirty, scratched, and exhausted. Never again, Mr. Stephen panted. Never again will I do something like this. But he was smiling, and Sarah realized that despite the fear, there was something exciting about fighting for what was hers. Back at the lawyer's office, they spread all the documents out on a large table. There were hundreds of papers, old deeds, contracts, letters, notes. Mr. Stephen began examining everything methodically, taking notes, sorting by type and date. This is gold, Sarah. Your grandfather documented absolutely everything. There are even notes from him explaining how he was deceived, with dates, names, details. So it's possible to prove he was innocent? More than that. It's possible to prove who the real culprits were. And look at this. He picked up a specific document. This is an original deed to a property that today belongs to the Sterling family. They own half of the arable land in the region. But according to this document, the land belonged to the Baker family who were evicted 40 years ago. Do the Bakers still exist? I'll look into it. If there are descendants, they have the right to reclaim the property. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like, and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot since we're just starting out and now continuing. Sarah spent the next few days at Mr. Stevens' office, helping catalogue all the documents. Joseph showed up frequently with news from the region, and the news wasn't good. Ryan is spreading word that you're an opportunist trying to steal the family inheritance, he told her. A lot of people are believing it. But I'm the rightful heir. I know. But he's got charm and connections. He's running a smear campaign against you. Mr. Stephen barely looked up from his papers. Let him talk. When we present all of this in court, he'll have to shut his mouth. But the situation kept getting worse. Threats started coming in. First, anonymous notes left at the office door. Then phone calls in the middle of the night. Text messages telling Sarah to give up while she still had a chance. They're getting nervous, Mr. Stevens said. That's a good sign. It means they know we have something real. A good sign. Sarah was terrified. They're threatening me. Threats only work if you let them. Are you going to give up? No. Then ignore them, and if they get more aggressive, we'll document everything and add it to the charges. While the legal case slowly moved forward, Mr. Stephen began investigating the descendants of the families who had lost their land. He found several. The Baker family still existed, as did the Jenkins, the Fosters, the Bryants. Many had left the region decades ago, but some still lived nearby in precarious conditions. I'll contact them, he said. I'll explain that they may have the right to recover their land. But won't that reduce what I receive? Mr. Stephen looked at Sarah seriously. It will, but it's the right thing to do. These families were harmed just as much as your grandfather, maybe more because they lost everything and didn't have the documents to prove it. Sarah thought about Mrs. Eleanor, who had taken her in, about Joseph, who was risking his reputation to help her, about all the simple people who had been crushed by powerful people. You're right. Let's bring everyone into the case. That's how the case began to grow. From a simple inheritance dispute, it became a class action involving dozens of families and questioning the ownership of land worth millions. The reaction was immediate and fierce. The families who controlled the land hired the best lawyers money could buy. They started appearing in the local press, giving interviews about how they were victims of an extortion attempt. Look at this. Joseph showed a newspaper to Sarah. They're saying you and Mr. Stephen are fabricating documents to make money. The article was cruel and full of insinuations. It said Sarah was a swindler, who had appeared out of nowhere claiming to be related to a man who had died years ago, that Mr. Stephen was known for taking on questionable cases, that it was all just an attempted scam. That's a lie, Sarah was furious. I know, but a lot of people will believe it. That's how the game works. Mr. Stephen, however, seemed excited. Great. The more noise they made, the more attention the case would get. And attention was exactly what they needed. He was right. With all the publicity, other lawyers started taking an interest in the case. Journalists from bigger cities showed up wanting to understand the story. And more importantly, more people started coming forward with stories of lost lands, of families destroyed by the same group of businessmen who had pulled off the scams decades earlier. One night, when Sarah was in the small back room of Mrs. Eleanor's house, she heard a knock at the door. It was a woman of about 70, thin and hunched, leaning on a cane. "Are you the girl from the inheritance?" she asked. "I am. How can I help? I heard about what you're doing, about the documents, about recovering the lands. Is it true?" "It's true, ma'am." The woman began to cry. "My family lost everything when I was a little girl. My father never recovered. He died. He died poor and bitter, believing it had been his fault. But it wasn't. They were robbed, just like other families. Would you like to be part of the case? I want justice. Even if it's too late for my father, I want his name cleared. I want everyone to know he wasn't a failure. He was a victim." Sarah hugged the woman, feeling the weight of all those stories. It wasn't just about inheritance or money. It was about dignity. It was about truth. Mr. Stephen incorporated the woman's testimony into the case, along with others that kept surfacing. The case was becoming something much bigger than anyone could have imagined, but the bigger it grew, the more dangerous it became. The threats intensified. One day, Sarah returned to the small room and found everything turned upside down. Someone had broken in and searched for something. Did they take anything? Mrs. Eleanor was terrified. "No, the documents are all with Mr. Stephen. There was nothing important here." "That was a warning, girl. They're saying they can get to you whenever they want." Sarah didn't sleep that night. She sat on the bed, hugging her knees, trying to decide if she had the courage to keep going. In the morning, she received an unexpected visit. It was a well-dressed man, driving an expensive car. "Miss Sarah? My name is Charles Sterling." The surname made Sarah tense up. The Sterling family was one of the main ones involved in the case. "What do you want?" "To talk. Just talk. May I come in?" She looked at Mrs. Eleanor, who gestured that she was there if needed. "You can talk right here." Charles sighed. "All right, I came here to make you an offer. A generous offer. $100,000 for you to give up on everything and leave. No questions, no judgment. You take the money and forget this whole story. $100,000. It was more money than Sarah had ever seen in her life. She could start over somewhere else, far from all these complications. And the other families, the ones who lost their lands? They're not your problem. You barely know these people. You're scared, aren't you?" Sarah felt a courage she didn't know she had. Scared of what will happen when the truth comes out. "It's not fear, it's common sense. You're one person against families established for generations. You don't stand a chance of winning." "Then why are you offering me money to give up?" Charles frowned. "This is your last chance. Turn down this offer and you'll regret it." "I won't accept it. You can leave." He left without saying another word, but Sarah could see the anger in his eyes. "You were very brave," Mrs. Eleanor said, "but also very foolish. $100,000, girl." "It's not about the money, Mrs. Eleanor. It never was." In the following days, the pressure increased even more. Bigger offers came in. 200,000, 300,000. Sarah refused them all. Then they changed tactics. They started going after the other families involved in the case, offering individual settlements. Some accepted, out of fear or necessity. Others held firm. "We're losing people," Mr. Stephen said, worried. "If many accept settlements, the lawsuit loses strength. What do? We keep going. With fewer people or with more, we keep going." The preliminary hearing was scheduled. It was only the beginning of the lawsuit, but it would be the first time everything would be officially discussed in a courtroom. Sarah was nervous that day. She wore the best clothes she had, which weren't much, and went with Mr. Stephen to the courthouse. The room was full. On one side, the lawyers for the accused families, all in impeccable suits with confident expressions. On the other, Mr. Stephen, Sarah, and the representatives of the few families still in the lawsuit. The judge was a man around 60, with a tired expression and the look of someone who had seen it all. "Let's begin. Mr. Stephen, present your case." The lawyer stood up and in a clear and methodical manner explained the whole history. He talked about Arthur, about the scheme carried out decades ago, about the documents that proved everything. He presented certified copies of deeds, contracts, letters. The opposing lawyers fought back, claiming the documents were forged, that the statute of limitations had passed, that there was no way to prove authenticity after so long. It was a technical and legal battle that lasted hours. Sarah barely understood half of what was being discussed, but she could tell from Mr. Stephen's expression that things weren't going well. In the end, the judge decided, "I'll need more time to review all the documentation presented. I'm going to appoint an expert to verify the authenticity of the documents. Until then, the injunction preventing Miss Sarah from accessing the property remains in effect. Next hearing in 60 days. 60 days? 2 months. until she'd know if she had any chance. Leaving the courthouse, Sarah felt drained. "Did it go well?" she asked Mr. Stephen. "Better than I expected. The judge didn't dismiss anything outright. That's a good sign." It didn't seem like a good sign. "Trust me, in cases like this, the fact that he didn't reject our petition outright is already a victory. But the wait would be long and hard." During that time, Sarah's life fell into a strange routine. She helped Mrs. Eleanor around the house in exchange for lodging, and spent her afternoons at Mr. Stephen's office, organizing documents and helping with research. Joseph showed up regularly with news, some good, some bad. "The expert appointed by the judge is honest," he said one day. "He won't be easy to bribe, that's good for you. And Ryan? He's quiet, too quiet. That worries me." Joseph's concern proved justified. A week later, a bombshell story appeared in the press. They had discovered that Sarah had a criminal record in another state. "But that's a lie," she shouted as she read the news. "I've never been arrested. I've never done anything." "I know." Mr. Stephen was pale. "They forged the records, and well done, I might add. But how do we prove it's a lie? We're going to have to file a lawsuit for defamation and forgery, and hope the judge sees through this smokescreen. It was a terrible period. Sarah couldn't step outside without receiving suspicious looks. The people who had started supporting her pulled away. Even Mrs. Eleanor seemed less warm. "I swear it's a lie," Sarah said to her, tears in her eyes. "I believe you, dear. But you need to understand that people are afraid of getting involved in trouble." The loneliness was overwhelming. Sarah began to question whether it was worth continuing. Maybe she should have taken the money. Maybe she should have left while she still had the chance. It was Joseph who brought her back. "You're thinking about giving up, aren't you?" he said bluntly. "How do you know?" "I can see it in your eyes. Same expression your grandfather had before he left." What if he was right? What if the fight isn't worth it? Your grandfather spent the rest of his life with remorse. He died without making peace with what had happened. Do you want to live like that? No. Then hold your head up and keep fighting. The conversation with Joseph reignited something in Sarah. She returned to work with renewed determination. The expert appointed by the judge finally gave his verdict. The documents were authentic. They were, in fact, original deeds and contracts from that era, with all signatures and stamps verified. "We won!" Mr. Stephen was elated. With the expert's report, the case changes completely. But the victory was short-lived. The defense filed appeal after appeal, claiming technical flaws, questioning the expert's impartiality, requesting further delays. "They're trying to drag out the process," Mr. Stephen explained. "The longer it takes, the more expensive it gets for us, and the more likely we are to give up. But we're not going to give up." No. But they don't know that. While the case dragged on through the courts, something unexpected happened. A journalist from a major newspaper in the state capital became interested in the story. She had heard about the case and wanted to do an investigative piece. "This could be great or terrible," Mr. Stephen said. "It depends on how she approaches it." Sarah agreed to give an interview. The journalist, named Claire, was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a recorder always on. "Tell me everything from the beginning," she said. Sarah told it all. From the manila envelope with the inheritance news to the threats and the fake documents about criminal records. Claire listened carefully, asking precise questions. "Do you have proof of what you're saying?" "I do. Documents, photos, everything." "And are you willing to make all of it available for verification?" "I am." The article came out 2 weeks later. It took up the newspaper's front page and 3 inside pages. Claire had done thorough work, investigating not just Sarah's case, but the whole history of the land in the region over the past decades. The impact was immediate. Other newspapers picked up the story. Radio programs started discussing it. Even a TV station from the state capital sent a crew to cover it. Suddenly, Sarah was no longer alone. Public opinion began to shift. People on the street stopped her to express their support. Donations started coming in to help with the legal costs. But with the support came more danger. The threats became more direct, more violent. "You need protection," Mr. Stephen said. This is getting too dangerous. Protection? What do you mean? Security guards. At least someone to keep an eye on you. I don't have money for that. I'll hire them and I'll deduct it later when we win. Sarah didn't want to admit it, but she was scared. She accepted. The bodyguard was a former military man in his 40s, tall and serious. He didn't talk much, but his presence was reassuring. The second hearing arrived. This time the courtroom was even more crowded. Journalists, onlookers, members of the families involved. It was as if the whole region had stopped to watch things unfold. The judge looked tired. Before we begin, I have an announcement to make. Due to the complexity of this case and its public repercussions, I have requested a transfer to a specialized court. This case will be tried in the state capital by a court better equipped to handle the magnitude of the accusations. Murmurs filled the room. Mr. Stevens smiled discreetly. The change of jurisdiction was good for them. The defense lawyers, however, seemed displeased. It took another 3 months for the case to be transferred and reorganized in the state capital. During that time, Sarah lived in a state of constant tension. Each day brought a new twist, a new threat, a new hope. Joseph remained her link to the region, bringing news and support. "People are starting to believe you," he said, "especially after that article. Lots of people who were afraid to speak up are coming forward with stories about the land." "Is that good?" "It's great. The more testimony we have, the stronger our case." But not everything was good news. Ryan kept up his smear campaign, now with more resources. He had managed to win over some allies among the powerful families, and together they spread rumors and lies. "Let him talk," Mr. Stephen kept saying. "Every lie he spreads makes him lose more credibility." Finally, the first hearing in the state capital was scheduled. It was in a large, imposing courtroom, very different from the small local courthouse. Sarah felt small as she walked into that enormous building, but by her side were Mr. Stephen, Joseph, Mrs. Eleanor, and several other people who had decided to support her. The judge in the state capital was a woman, Judge Margaret, known for being strict but fair. "Let's get down to business," she said as soon as everyone was settled. "I've read the entire case file, the expert report, and the responses. This is an extraordinary case, and I intend to treat it with all the seriousness it deserves." The hearing lasted the entire day. Witnesses were called, evidence was presented, cross-examinations were conducted. Sarah had to take the witness stand and tell her side of the story under oath. "You claim to have legitimately inherited your grandfather's property," the defense attorney attacked, "but there are records showing you barely knew that grandfather. How can you be sure he really wanted to leave everything to you?" "I can't be certain of what he wanted," Sarah replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "But he left a will registered at the county clerk's office, and in that will, he left everything to me. I didn't ask for it. I didn't expect it. But when I received it, I decided to honor his memory by doing the right thing." "The right thing? You call it right to challenge the property of established families, cause social upheaval, destroy reputations? I call seeking the truth the right thing. My grandfather spent decades carrying the weight of something he didn't do. These families you say I'm harming? They built fortunes on stolen land. The real injustice was what they did 40 years ago." The attorney tried to rattle her with more questions, but Sarah stood her ground. All the anger, all the frustration, all the suffering she had been through came out in her answers. When she finally stepped down from the witness stand, she was trembling. Mrs. Eleanor hugged her. "You did very well, dear. Very well." The judge set a new date for the ruling, 6 more weeks of waiting. During that time, something surprising happened. Cracks began to appear in the group opposed to Sarah. Some of the families, seeing the strength of the evidence and the direction the case was taking, began to distance themselves from the others. One of them, the Foster family, even offered a deal to return land they had acquired illegally, in exchange for not being prosecuted criminally. "This is huge," Mr. Stevens said. "If one family is willing to make a deal, others will follow. The castle is crumbling." And it truly was. In the following days, 2 more families came forward to negotiate. Only the Sterling family and a few close allies kept resisting. Charles Sterling made one last attempt to buy Sarah's silence. He offered $500,000 and the return of the ranch. "No," she said without even thinking twice. "You're a fool," he spat the words. "You could be rich right now." "I don't want wealth built on lies." The ruling finally came. Sarah was so nervous she could barely sit still. The courtroom was packed again, with even more journalists and onlookers. Judge Margaret walked in, and everyone stood up. She sat down, adjusted her glasses, and began to read. After a thorough analysis of all the evidence and testimony presented, this court has reached the following conclusions. Sarah held Mrs. Eleanor's hand tightly. First, it is proven that the will left by Arthur Mitchell in favor of his granddaughter, Sarah Mitchell, is legitimate and valid. All challenges are rejected. Sarah let out a sigh of relief. Second, the documents presented by Miss Sarah are authentic and prove significant fraud in the property transfers carried out approximately 40 years ago. There was murmuring in the room. Third, I order the opening of complete investigations into all land transfers carried out during the period in question in the region. Families who acquired land fraudulently have 60 days to present a defense or reach an agreement with the rightful owners. The room exploded in reactions. Some celebrated, others protested. The defense lawyers stood up indignantly, announcing they would appeal. But Sarah barely heard. She had won. Not just the inheritance, but the possibility of bringing justice to so many people. The judge banged her gavel, asking for order. Furthermore, I order that Miss Sarah Mitchell be immediately reinstated in possession of her property, with the right to compensation for damages caused during the period of illegal seizure. When they left the courthouse, Sarah was greeted with applause. People she had never seen came to greet her, thank her, offer help. Joseph had tears in his eyes. Your grandfather would be proud, but the fight wasn't over. As expected, there were appeals, attempts to overturn the decision, political pressures. However, the strength of the evidence and public support were too great. One by one, the appeals were denied, and the families, seeing they could no longer sustain the lies, began to give in. Agreements were made, lands were returned, compensations were paid. The entire process took another year, but in the end, dozens of families recovered what was rightfully theirs. Sarah, having led the entire movement and provided the crucial evidence, received not only the ranch, but a significant percentage of the compensations. Suddenly, she who had nothing had plenty of resources. The first thing she did was return to the ranch. Joseph and several other people from the community went with her. This time, there were no guards at the gate, no fences blocking entry. The place was even more deteriorated after all the time abandoned. But now there was hope. "We're going to rebuild," she said. "Not just the house, but everything. We're going to make this place a symbol that justice still exists." And that's what they did. With the resources she had, Sarah hired local workers, people from the community that had been helped by the case. Together, they began to restore the ranch. The house was rebuilt, more beautiful than ever. A running water system was installed. Electricity arrived. The land was treated and planted. But Sarah didn't stop there. She created a community center on the ranch where families benefited by the case could gather, share experiences, help each other. Her grandfather's former employee, Joseph, ended up becoming the ranch manager. He knew the land and had Sarah's trust. One day, Joseph arrived with a strange expression. "Remember I told you your grandfather had hidden a letter?" "I remember. I found it. It was inside the old Bible that was in the house. The Bible survived everything, and the letter was there." With trembling hands, Sarah opened the envelope, yellowed by time. "My dear granddaughter, if you're reading this, it means you had the courage I didn't have. It means you did what was right, even when it was hard. I spent 40 years running from the truth, living with the shame of something I didn't do, but didn't have the strength to fight. I leave these documents to you not as material inheritance, but as a request. Bring justice, not for the lands, not for the money, but for the people who were harmed. You never knew me, and for that I ask your forgiveness. I was a coward, but I chose you as my heir because I saw your mother raise a strong, honest woman, capable of doing what I couldn't. No matter how long it takes, no matter how hard it is, seek the truth. It's the only inheritance truly worth leaving behind. With love and regret, your grandfather, Arthur, Sarah cried as she read it. She cried for all the struggles, for all the hardships, but also out of relief. She had fulfilled his request. She had honored his memory. In the following months, the ranch was completely transformed. It became a prosperous place full of life. But more than that, it became a symbol of hope for the entire region. The families who recovered their lands began to prosper. Some started agricultural cooperatives. Others invested in small businesses. The community, once divided and bitter, began to heal. Sarah looked at all of it and could barely believe it. Months ago, she had been desperate, alone, without money, and without hope. Now she was surrounded by friends, with resources, and most importantly, with purpose. Ryan, the cousin who had tried so hard to harm her, was exposed as an accomplice to the old frauds. He lost all credibility in the region and ended up moving away. Sarah felt no satisfaction in that, only sadness. Sadness that someone had let themselves be corrupted by greed. Mrs. Eleanor became her best friend. They spent hours talking, planning improvements for the community, caring for people in need. Mr. Stephen, who had taken the case when no one else would, received his percentage and used part of the money to open a larger office, focused on helping people in unjust situations. "You taught me something important," he told Sarah, "that some cases aren't about money. They're about doing what's right." Joseph became almost like a father to Sarah. He taught her about the land, about the community, about life in the countryside. One day, almost 2 years after everything had begun, Sarah was on the porch of the rebuilt house, drinking coffee and watching the sun rise over the lands that were now truly hers, when she had a deep reflection. She had come to that place thinking she would find an inheritance that would solve her financial problems. Instead, she found something far more valuable: a purpose, a community, a reason to fight. The lands weren't just hers. They belonged to everyone who had been wronged, and she was merely the guardian, the person who had the courage to fight when others couldn't. The ranch became a gathering place for the entire region. On weekends, families came for community events. Children played where there had once only been rubble. Where there had been abandonment, now there was life. Sarah never forgot how she had arrived there, alone, scared, with nothing. That memory kept her humble and grateful. Whenever someone came to the ranch needing help, she remembered when she had been in that position. She created an assistance program for struggling families, offering work on the ranch, teaching sustainable farming, providing legal support when needed. Everything she wished she had had when she arrived. Her story began to inspire others. Journalists from all over the country came to do stories. Legal scholars used the case as an example of delayed justice. She received letters from people in similar situations, asking for advice. "You've become a symbol," Mr. Stephen said, half joking, half serious. "I don't want to be a symbol. I just want to live in peace." Too late. When you decided to fight, you became an example. But life wasn't only about the past and the struggle. Sarah began building a future too. She met a man from the region, a teacher at the rural school who admired what she was doing. They started seeing each other slowly, without rushing. "You're amazing," he said one day. "I don't know if I would have had your courage." It wasn't courage. It was desperation that turned into determination. Call it whatever you want. It's admirable. The relationship grew naturally, without pressure. He helped her with the educational projects on the ranch, teaching the children from the community. She helped at his school with resources and materials. 3 years after the day she had first arrived at the ranch, Sarah organized a big celebration. She invited every family that had been helped by the process, all the lawyers, journalists, and supporters. "Today marks 3 years since I arrived here," she said, before hundreds of people. "I arrived with nothing, expecting nothing, and I found everything. Not just land or money, but a community, a purpose, a family." She looked at Joseph, at Mrs. Eleanor, at Mr. Stephen, at all the people who had fought by her side. "My grandfather left me an inheritance, but it wasn't the ranch. It was the opportunity to right a wrong, to bring about justice, to build something greater than myself, and I hope I have honored that inheritance. The applause was long and emotional. When the party ended and people went home, Sarah stood alone on the porch, looking at the stars. She thought about everything she had been through, the nights sleeping in the rubble, the hunger, the fear, the threats. But she also thought about the victories, the justice that had been achieved, the lives that had been changed. Every second of suffering was worth it. The ranch was no longer an abandoned place. It was a home. It was a symbol. It was proof that sometimes the greatest riches don't come in the form of money, but of dignity restored and justice finally served. And Sarah, the woman who had arrived with nothing, now had everything that truly mattered: peace, purpose, and the certainty that she had done the right thing. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. The years that followed brought even more changes. Sarah's ranch became a regional reference as an example of sustainable agriculture and community development. But it wasn't a path without challenges. One day, almost 5 years after it all had begun, Sarah received news that shook her to the core. One of the families that had recovered their land was being sued by a large company that claimed to have bought the property in good faith before the investigations. This could set a precedent for others to challenge the land returns, Mr. Stephen explained, worried. But how? The court's already decided. Yes, but this company is arguing that it wasn't part of the original proceedings and that it has rights as a good faith third party. It was the Baker family, that elderly woman who had cried when talking about her father. Now she was at risk of losing everything all over again. Sarah didn't think twice. She used her own resources to hire the best lawyers to defend the Baker family. She mobilized the press, organized protests, did everything within her power. "Why are you doing this?" Mrs. Baker asked, emotional. "You've already done so much for us." "Because the fight never ends. There will always be someone trying to take advantage, but as long as I have strength, I'll keep fighting." The Baker family's case dragged on for months. The company had immense resources, and lawyers specialized in finding loopholes in the law. But Sarah and Mr. Stephen had something money couldn't buy: the truth and the community's support. They organized a campaign that went viral on social media. People from all over the country sent messages of support, made donations to the legal fund, and shared the story. The public pressure was so great that the company eventually dropped the lawsuit, preferring to avoid the damage to its image. It was an important victory, but Sarah knew other challenges would come, and they did. A year later, they faced a severe drought crisis that hit the entire region. The crops died, the wells dried up, and despair began to take hold. Sarah gathered all the small farmers from the ranch and the neighboring properties. "We have to unite. On our own, we'll go under. Together, we can survive." They created a resource-sharing system. Those who had deeper wells shared water. Those who had equipment lent it out. Those who had knowledge taught conservation techniques. It was hard. There were arguments, disagreements, moments when it seemed like everything was about to fall apart. But the community Sarah had helped build stayed strong. When the drought finally ended, they hadn't just survived, they came out stronger. The cooperation system they created during the crisis became permanent, giving rise to an official agricultural cooperative. Joseph, who was now almost 70, always said, "Your grandfather planted a seed when he saved those documents. You watered that seed with your courage, and now we're reaping the harvest." But it wasn't all work and struggle. Sarah also found time to live. Her relationship with the teacher, Thomas, deepened. They got married in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with the whole community in attendance. "Are you sure you want to marry me?" Thomas had asked, half joking. "Life with me won't be easy. I'm married to this ranch and this community. That's exactly why I want to marry you." Together, they expanded the educational projects. They built a small school at the ranch for the children of the region. Thomas taught classes in the morning, and in the afternoon the children learned about agriculture, sustainability, and the history of the region. It's important that they know where they came from, Sarah explained, that they learn about the struggle of their parents and grandparents. That way they'll value what they have. Mrs. Eleanor, who was already over 70, continued to be a constant presence. She had a practical wisdom that Sarah always sought out. "Girl, you're doing too much," she'd say when she saw Sarah working from sunup to sundown. "You need to rest too." "How am I supposed to rest when there's so much to do?" "That's because you haven't figured it out yet. The struggle never ends. There will always be something to do, someone to help, a problem to solve. If you don't learn to rest, you'll burn out." Sarah began to understand this better when, at 35, she found out she was pregnant. The pregnancy forced her to slow down, to delegate more, to trust that the community she had helped build could sustain itself without her being present for every decision. It was a difficult lesson for someone used to controlling everything, but a necessary one. Her son was born on a spring morning. It was a boy, and she named him Arthur in honor of her grandfather. "He'll grow up hearing stories about his great-grandfather," Sarah said, holding the baby for the first time. "He'll know that mistakes can be corrected, that the truth always finds a way, that it's worth fighting for." Joseph came to visit her at the hospital, bringing flowers from the ranch. "Your grandfather would be so happy," he said, his eyes welling up, "to see all of this, to see you, to see that his name was cleared, to see that his struggle wasn't in vain." Motherhood changed Sarah. It didn't diminish her determination or her commitment to the community, but it added a new dimension. Now she wasn't just building the present, she was preparing the future. She began to document everything. She wrote the complete story of what had happened from the day she received the news of the inheritance to the present. She kept copies of all the important documents. She recorded testimonies from Joseph, Mrs. Eleanor, and the families who had benefited. "What's all this for?" Thomas asked. "So that it's never forgotten, so that if 50 years from now someone tries to rewrite history, there's proof of what really happened." Mr. Stephen, who had become a close friend as well as a lawyer, used the case to write a book about justice and perseverance. The book became study material in law schools. "You inspired an entire generation of lawyers," he told Sarah at the book launch. "It wasn't me, it was the truth. I was just lucky enough to be the instrument." But life, as always, kept bringing surprises. When little Arthur was 3 years old, a man Sarah had never seen showed up at the ranch. He was older, maybe around 70, and had a nervous look about him. "My name is Gerald Anderson," he said. "I was your grandfather's partner." Sarah felt as if time stood still. Gerald, the man who had disappeared after the swindle, the man everyone thought was dead or had fled the country. "Come in," she managed to say, still in shock. Sitting on the porch, Gerald told his story. After the swindle, he had fled out of fear of being arrested. He changed his name, lived hidden in other regions of the country. Only recently had he discovered, through news about the case, that Sarah had proven Arthur's innocence. "I spent 40 years running, living with guilt and shame," he said, tears in his eyes. "I thought I was an accomplice, that I had done something wrong, but I hadn't. We were both deceived, Arthur and I." "Why did you come back?" "Because I'm old, because I want to make peace with the past before I go, and because I wanted to thank you for doing what neither I nor your grandfather had the courage to do." Sarah felt a mix of emotions, anger at him for having fled, understanding for the fear he must have felt, sadness for all the wasted lives. "What do you want now?" "Nothing. I just wanted to see the place with my own eyes, to see that it wasn't all in vain, and to ask for forgiveness, even if I don't deserve it." They talked for hours. Gerald told details about the swindle that even the documents didn't reveal, names of people involved that had never been exposed. He had kept it all in his memory for decades. "Do you want to do something with this information?" Sarah asked. "I don't know if I have the strength for another battle, but I do." With Gerald's new testimonies, Sarah and Mr. Stephen reopened investigations into some of those involved who had never been held accountable. It wasn't about revenge, but about completing the circle of justice. Gerald ended up staying in the area. Sarah helped him settle into a simple little house near the ranch. He spent his final years finally at peace, seeing the result of what one young woman's courage had accomplished, where two men had failed. When Gerald passed away 3 years later, he left everything he had to Sarah. It wasn't much in material terms, but it included documents and photos that completed the story. Sarah organized a memorial at the ranch, not just for Gerald and her grandfather, but for all the people who had been harmed by the swindle. There were dozens of names, dozens of stories of destroyed families. "They will not be forgotten," she said at the memorial's opening. "This stone will remain here as a reminder that injustices can be corrected, even if it takes decades, and as a warning, so that we never allow something like this to happen again." The ranch kept growing. The agricultural cooperative prospered. The school had waiting lists. The social programs helped hundreds of families. And Sarah, now the mother of 2 children, a girl was born 2 years after Arthur, divided her time between family and community work. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had accepted those $5,000 that Ryan offered me on the first day," she commented one day to Thomas. "You wouldn't have what you have today." Exactly. And I'm not talking about money or land, I'm talking about purpose, about knowing that I made a difference in people's lives, about having built something greater than myself. Joseph, who was growing increasingly frail with age, came to live at the ranch. Sarah built a little special house for him, where he spent his days telling stories to the school children about the old days, about Arthur, about how the region used to be. "You know you're going to have to keep this going when I'm gone, right?" he said to Sarah one day. "Don't talk like that. I have to talk about it. I'm almost 80 years old. I've lived much longer than I expected. But before I go, I need to be sure you'll continue the fight. I'll always continue it. And will you teach your children to continue it too?" "I will." Joseph passed away in his sleep on a quiet summer night. The funeral was enormous, with people from all over the region coming to pay their respects. He had become a father figure to Sarah and an honorary grandfather to her children. Sarah cried like she hadn't cried since her own mother's death years before. But along with the sadness, there was gratitude. Joseph had lived to see the victory, to see justice done, to see the ranch prosper. Mrs. Eleanor, at 85, was still active, though slower. She had become the grandmother the children never had. "You transformed my life," she told Sarah. "I was just an old woman renting out a small room. Now I'm part of something important." "You were always important, Mrs. Eleanor. You just needed someone to see it." The years passed. Little Arthur grew up hearing stories about his great-grandfather and about his mother's struggle. At 12 years old, he asked, "Mom, do you think I'll have to fight the way you fought?" Sarah thought carefully before answering. "I hope not. I hope the world is fairer by the time you grow up. But if you ever need to fight, know that you have the strength of generations of fighters inside you, and that you will never be alone." The cooperative that had started small was now one of the largest in the region. It directly employed more than 100 people and indirectly benefited hundreds of families. Sarah had stepped back from daily management, handing it over to younger people and keeping only an advisory role. "You need to learn to let go," Thomas would say. "Let others take the lead." "It's hard. I built this with so much effort." And that's exactly why you need to trust that it will continue without you having to control every detail. It was a difficult transition, but a necessary one. Sarah realized she had spent so much time fighting, building, proving herself, that she had forgotten how to simply live. She began dedicating more time to her children, traveling with Thomas, reading books that had nothing to do with farming or law, discovering hobbies. "You seem lighter," Mrs. Eleanor observed. "I feel lighter. I finally understood that I don't have to carry the world on my shoulders all the time. But even so, the fight still called to her from time to time. When she learned that a new company was trying to buy up land in the region using questionable tactics, she didn't hesitate to get involved. "I thought you had retired," Mr. Stephen joked when she showed up at his office. "I retired from daily management, but I will never retire from defending what's right." Together they exposed the new fraud attempt before it could cause any damage. The accumulated experience of all those years meant they recognized the signs quickly. When Sarah turned 50, the community organized a huge surprise party. People came from every corner of the region, many she didn't even know personally but who had been indirectly helped by her work. "You changed this region," the mayor said in an emotional speech. "You didn't just recover land or build a prosperous ranch. You changed people's mindset. You showed that it's possible to fight against injustice and win." Sarah looked around. She saw the faces of people she had helped. She saw the children studying at the school she had built. She saw the green, productive land where there had once only been neglect. She saw Thomas and his children, her family. She saw her grandfather's legacy finally honored. "I didn't change anything alone," she said, when called up to speak. "Every person here contributed. Everyone who had the courage to believe in the truth, to fight for justice, to not give up when things got hard. This victory belongs to all of us." The applause went on for a long time. But Sarah wasn't thinking about the applause. She was thinking about that 25-year-old young woman who had arrived at the ranch for the first time, desperate and alone. If she could go back and talk to that young woman, what would she say? "It's going to be hard, harder than you can imagine. You'll want to give up 1,000 times, you'll cry, you'll be afraid, you'll feel alone. But in the end, every second of suffering will be worth it. Because it's not about the money or the land, it's about becoming the person you were born to be." Mrs. Eleanor passed away at 90, surrounded by people she loved. Sarah held her hand until the very end. "Thank you," Mrs. Eleanor whispered, "for letting me be part of all this. Thank you for taking me in when I had nothing." Mrs. Eleanor's death marked the end of an era. She was the last of the people who had taken Sarah in during those first difficult days. Joseph had already passed away. Mr. Stephen was retired and in fragile health. It was time for a new generation to take over. Arthur, now 22, had studied law following in Mr. Stephen's footsteps. He returned to the area with new ideas and renewed energy. "I want to continue the work you started, Mom, but my own way. And I wouldn't expect anything less." Her daughter, Alice, had chosen agronomy and was revolutionizing farming techniques at the cooperative. Together, the siblings made a formidable duo. Sarah could finally rest easy, knowing the legacy was in good hands. At 60, Sarah wrote a book, not about the legal battles or courtroom victories, but about the people, about Mrs. Eleanor and her kindness, about Joseph and his loyalty, about the families who fought together, about the community that rose from the ashes. The book became an unexpected bestseller. People from all over the country wrote saying the story had inspired them to fight for their own causes. "You don't realize the impact you've had," Thomas said, reading one of the letters. "This woman here says she was about to give up fighting an unfair labor dispute, but she read your book and decided to keep going. And she won. I didn't make her win. It was her own courage. But you lit the flame." When Sarah turned 70, the ranch was completely unrecognizable compared to that abandoned place from decades ago. It was a thriving complex with productive farms, a renowned school, an active community center, and dozens of families living well. The memorial she had created became a destination for visitors. Schools brought students to learn about the region's history, about how one person's courage can make a difference. Sarah spent her days on the porch she loved so much, watching her grandchildren play, watching the land thrive, watching her grandfather's legacy finally complete. One day, one of the grandchildren, an 8-year-old girl named Eleanor, in honor of Mrs. Eleanor, asked, "Grandma, are you afraid of death?" "No, my dear." "Why?" "Because you're important. If you die, who's going to take care of all this?" Sarah smiled and stroked the girl's hair. "You know what I learned through this whole journey? That nothing really depends on just one person. When I got here, I thought I had to do everything alone. But I soon discovered that the strength was in the community, in people helping each other, in truth being shared. But you fought. You made it happen. I took the first step, but hundreds of people kept walking with me. And when I'm no longer here, you'll carry on. You, your siblings, your parents, and then your children, and their children. So that's what legacy is? Exactly. Legacy isn't about having your name on a plaque. It's about planting seeds that keep growing long after you're gone. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and hit like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us folks who are just starting out. Now continuing, the years that followed brought even more changes. Sarah's ranch became a regional benchmark as an example of sustainable agriculture and community development. But it wasn't a path without challenges. One day, almost 5 years after it all began, Sarah received news that shook her to her core. One of the families that had recovered their land was being sued by a large company that claimed to have purchased the property in good faith before the investigations. This could set a precedent for others to challenge the land returns, Mr. Stephen explained, worried. But how? The court's already decided. Yes, but this company is arguing that they weren't part of the original proceedings and that they have rights as good faith third parties. It was the Baker family, that elderly woman who had cried when talking about her father. Now she was at risk of losing everything all over again. Sarah didn't think twice. She used her own resources to hire the best lawyers to defend the Baker family. She rallied the press, organized protests, did everything within her power. "Why are you doing this?" old Mrs. Baker asked, emotional. "You've already done so much for us." "Because the fight never ends. There's always going to be someone trying to take advantage. But as long as I have strength, I'll keep fighting." The Baker family's case dragged on for months. The company had immense resources, and lawyers specialized in finding loopholes in the law. But Sarah and Mr. Stephen had something money couldn't buy: the truth and the support of the community. They organized a campaign that went viral on social media. People from all over the country sent messages of support, made donations to the legal fund, and shared the story. The public pressure was so great that the company eventually dropped the lawsuit, preferring to avoid the damage to their image. It was an important victory, but Sarah knew other challenges would come, and they did. A year later, they faced a severe drought crisis that hit the entire region. The crops died, the wells dried up, and despair began to take hold. Sarah gathered all the small farmers from the ranch and the neighboring properties. "We have to unite. On our own, we'll break. Together, we can survive." They created a resource-sharing system. Those who had a deeper well shared water. Those who had equipment lent it out. Those who had knowledge taught conservation techniques. It was hard. There were arguments, disagreements, moments when it seemed like everything was about to fall apart. But the community Sarah had helped build stayed strong. One of the most tense moments was when they discovered someone was secretly taking water at night, more than their allowed share. Suspicion began to spread. "I need to know who's doing this," Sarah said at a community meeting. "Not to punish, but to understand. Maybe that person needs more help than we realize." That's when a young mother stood up, trembling. "It was me. My daughter is sick and needed more water for her medicine. I didn't know what to do." Instead of anger, there was compassion. The community mobilized to help the child, and they established an emergency fund for special situations. "See," Joseph said to Sarah, "you created more than a cooperative. You created a family. When the drought finally passed, they hadn't just survived, they came out stronger." The cooperation system they created during the crisis became permanent, giving rise to an official agricultural cooperative. Joseph, who was now nearly 70, always said, "Your grandfather planted a seed when he kept those documents. You watered that seed with your courage, and now we're reaping the fruits." But it wasn't all work and struggle. Sarah found time to live as well. Her relationship with the teacher, Thomas, deepened. They got married in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with the whole community present. "Are you sure you want to marry me?" Sarah had asked, half joking. "Life with me won't be easy. I'm married to this ranch and this community." "That's exactly why I want to marry you," Thomas replied, holding her hands. The ceremony was beautiful in its simplicity. There was no expensive decor or fancy food, but there was love. There was community. There was authenticity. During the vows, Thomas said, Sarah, when I met you, you were already at war with the world. But I learned that your war wasn't born of anger. It was born of justice, and I want to spend the rest of my life fighting by your side. Sarah, who rarely cried in public, let the tears fall. Thomas, you taught me that it's possible to fight without losing the capacity to love. That being strong doesn't mean being hard. Thank you for showing me that I can be a warrior and a woman at the same time. Joseph was the one who pronounced them husband and wife in a moving moment. By the authority granted to me, he stopped, too emotional to continue. Mrs. Eleanor finished for him. By the authority of love and community, I pronounce you husband and wife. The celebration lasted all night. There was live music, food made by the community, dancing and laughter. It was everything Sarah had always wanted, but never thought she'd have. A chosen family. The first years of marriage were an adjustment. Thomas had his ways. Sarah had hers. He was calmer, she was more impulsive. He liked to plan, she preferred to act, but it worked, in ways neither of them expected. You calm me down when I'm about to explode, Sarah would say. And you push me when I've gotten too comfortable, Thomas would reply. Together they expanded the educational projects. They built a small school at the ranch for the children of the region. Thomas taught classes in the morning, and in the afternoon the children learned about agriculture, sustainability, and the history of the region. It's important that they know where they came from, Sarah explained to the parents, that they know about the struggle of their parents and grandparents. That way they'll value what they have. The school started with 10 students. Within 5 years it had over 100. Children from all over the region came to study there, some traveling nearly an hour by bus every day. Why do you bring your children from so far away? Sarah asked one mother. Because here they learn more than reading and writing. They learn about values, about community, about not giving up when things get hard. It was around that time that Sarah and Thomas decided to have children. She was already 32 and worried she might be too late. It's never too late to start building a family, Mrs. Eleanor said. Look at you. You started from nothing at 25, and look at everything you've built. The pregnancy was difficult. Sarah had terrible morning sickness in the first months and had to slow down her frenetic pace of work. I don't know how to rest, she complained to Thomas. Then learn. Your child needs a healthy mother, not an exhausted heroine. It was a hard lesson. Sarah had always defined herself by work, by the fight. Having to stop, even temporarily, shook her identity. But slowly, she began to appreciate the calmer time. She read more. She talked more with Mrs. Eleanor. She allowed herself to simply exist, without always doing something productive. Arthur was born on an autumn morning. He was a strong, loud baby, with his father's dark eyes and his mother's stubbornness. He's going to be a handful, the midwife said, laughing. Just like his mother, Joseph joked. Holding her son in her arms for the first time was transformative for Sarah. Suddenly, she wasn't just fighting for herself or the community anymore. She was fighting for his future. You're going to grow up in a better world, she whispered to the baby, a world that we're building for you. Motherhood changed Sarah in ways she hadn't expected. It didn't diminish her determination or her commitment to the community, but it added a new dimension. Now every decision had to consider the impact on the future, on the world she was leaving for her son. When Arthur was 2 years old, Sarah discovered she was pregnant again, this time with a girl. Arthur is going to have a little sister, she told her young son. Sissy, he replied, not fully understanding but excited by the news. Alice was born during a rainy spring. She was smaller than her brother had been, more delicate, but with a cry that woke up the entire ranch. That one's going to be a talker, Mrs. Eleanor predicted. Mark my words. And she was right. Alice started talking early and never stopped. By age 3, she was asking about everything, wanting to understand how things worked, why people did what they did. Where does rain come from, Mummy? How do plants grow? Why does Grandpa Joseph walk slowly? Sarah answered each question patiently, happy to have a curious daughter. With 2 small children, the house became more chaotic, but it was also fuller of life and joy. Joseph, who had no children of his own, became the grandfather the kids adored. "Tell the story again about Grandma Sarah and the hidden documents," Arthur would ask. "But I've told it 1,000 times already. Tell it one more time." And Joseph would tell it, always adding new details, always making the children's eyes shine with excitement. The years with young children were intense. Sarah split her time between motherhood and her work in the community. She didn't always manage to balance it well. There were nights when she cried from exhaustion, days when she felt she was failing as a mother for spending too much time working, and failing as a community leader for spending too much time with her kids. "You can't be everything to everyone," Thomas said on one of those difficult nights. "You need to choose your battles." "But how do I choose? How do I decide what's most important?" "Maybe it's not about what's most important. Maybe it's about what needs you in this exact moment." The advice helped. Sarah started being more strategic with her time and energy. She delegated more tasks at the cooperative. She set clearer boundaries. And perhaps most importantly, she allowed herself to ask for help. Mrs. Eleanor became a constant presence, helping with the children when Sarah needed to travel for meetings or hearings. Joseph taught Arthur about the land, about the plants, about the animals. "It takes a village to raise a child," Mrs. Eleanor always said, "and we are their village." When Arthur was 6 years old, something happened that shook the family. He was bitten by a venomous snake while playing near the river. Sarah will never forget the moment she heard the screams. She ran and found her son on the ground, pale, his leg already swelling. "Snake," he managed to say. "It bit me." The drive to the hospital was desperate. Sarah held her son, praying, promising everything to the heavens if he survived. "Everything's going to be okay, my love. Mommy's here. Everything's going to be okay." At the hospital, there were agonizing hours of waiting. The doctor explained it was a coral snake, extremely venomous, but that they had arrived in time. 15 more minutes and we would have lost him," the doctor said. Sarah nearly fainted at the revelation. 15 minutes. The difference between life and death was 15 minutes. Arthur was hospitalized for a week. Sarah didn't leave his side for even a second. Thomas brought food, clean clothes, news from home. But she wouldn't leave. "Mom, I'm okay," Arthur would say. "You can go home and rest." "I'll rest here." When they were finally discharged, Sarah was exhausted but infinitely grateful. When she got home, she hugged Alice so tightly that the girl complained. "You're hurting me, Mom." "Sorry, sweetheart, it's just that Mommy loves you all so much." Arthur's accident changed something in Sarah. It made her realize that no matter how much she fought for bigger causes, her priority had to be her family. It was no use changing the world if she lost what was most precious to her. She reduced her direct involvement in the cooperative even further. She began to take part only in strategic decisions, leaving day-to-day management to other people. "Are you stepping away?" someone asked, concerned. "No, I'm delegating. I'm trusting that the community can move forward without me being present at every step, and I need to do this because my children need me." It was a difficult but necessary decision, and she discovered that the community not only survived without her constant presence, but thrived. New leaders emerged. New ideas were implemented. "You built something so strong that it no longer needs you to exist," Thomas observed. "That's true success." The years went by. Arthur fully recovered from the accident and grew up strong and healthy. Alice became a vibrant, talkative girl, always with 1,000 questions. The school at the ranch continued to grow. The cooperative prospered. The community was more united than ever. But Sarah knew that new challenges would always arise, and they did. When Arthur was 10 and Alice was 8, a proposal came up to build a road cutting through the region. The government said it would bring progress, development, opportunities. But Sarah saw beyond the pretty promises. The road would pass right through the middle of several properties that had been reclaimed. It would cut through lands that families had fought for decades to win back. "We can't allow this," she said at a community meeting. "But it's progress," some argued. "We'll become isolated if we don't accept it." Progress that destroys what we've built isn't progress. It's regression under another name. It was the beginning of a new battle. This time not against greedy individuals, but against a bureaucratic machine that seemed unstoppable. Sarah mobilized the community. They conducted environmental and social impact studies. They proposed alternative routes that wouldn't destroy the properties. They brought in experts to show the damage the road would cause. "You're being against progress," a local politician accused. "No, we're in favor of our kind of progress, the kind that doesn't sacrifice communities in the name of convenience." The fight lasted more than a year. There were moments when it seemed like they were going to lose. The government's power, the political pressure, the economic interests were immense. But Sarah had learned something over the years. Public opinion is a powerful force when well mobilized. Eleanor, the granddaughter who would later write the biography, was still a young woman at that time. She used social media brilliantly, creating a campaign that went viral. Defend Our Community became a national trending topic. Journalists from major outlets came to cover the story. Celebrities shared supportive posts. The pressure was so great that the government backed down. They presented an alternative route that, although more expensive, didn't destroy the properties. It was an important victory. It proved that the community had power, that it could defend itself not only against individuals, but against large institutions. "You never rest, do you?" Thomas joked after the victory. "It's not that I don't want to rest. It's that there's always something new to face." "And do you think it will ever end?" "No. But I learned to choose my battles better. This one was worth it. It was threatening everything we built." Mrs. Eleanor, who was now over 70, was still a constant presence in Sarah's and the children's lives. "You know you're my hero, right?" she said to Sarah one day. "Mrs. Eleanor, I'm nobody's hero." "You are to me. I was just an old woman who rented out a small room. You gave me purpose. You made me feel like part of something important. You were always important. You just needed someone to see that. And you saw it. When no one else did." The relationship between Sarah and Mrs. Eleanor was special. Mrs. Eleanor had become the mother Sarah had lost when she was young, and Sarah was the daughter Mrs. Eleanor never had. They spent hours talking, sharing stories, advising one another. "What do I do when I get tired?" Sarah asked one day. "When I feel like I can't take it anymore?" "You rest, and then you keep going. That's how it is for everyone. No one can fight forever without stopping." "But there's so much to do." "And there always will be. Even after you're gone, there will be. You don't have to solve everything by yourself." Those were wise words from someone who had lived a lot and seen a lot. Joseph, on the other hand, was frailer. He spent most of his time sitting on the porch telling stories to anyone who passed by. "I'm getting old," he would say, without bitterness, just stating a fact. "You're getting wise," Sarah would correct. It's the same thing with a different name. Arthur and Alice loved Grandpa Joseph. They spent hours with him, listening to stories about the old days, about what the region was like before, about the struggles that had been fought. "And was Grandma Sarah brave?" Alice would ask. "The bravest I ever knew, but she was afraid too, like everyone. Courage isn't not being afraid. It's being afraid and doing it anyway." These lessons stayed with the children. Years later, when they faced their own challenges, they would remember Grandpa Joseph's words. Life at the ranch had found a rhythm. It wasn't always peaceful, but it was good. There was routine, but also surprises. There was work, but also joy. Sarah began to realize that for the first time in years, she was genuinely happy. Not happy despite the struggles, but happy with the life she had built through them. "You smile more," Thomas observed. "I have reasons to smile." "You always did. You're just allowing yourself now." It was true. For so long, Sarah had felt guilty about any moment of joy, as if she didn't deserve to be happy while there were still wrongs to right. But she was learning that joy and struggle could coexist. That one fed the other. When Arthur turned 15, he announced he wanted to be a lawyer. "Like Mr. Stephen," he said. Sarah felt a mix of pride and concern. "It's a difficult choice. You'll see a lot of injustice. You'll have to fight hard." "I know, but you taught me it's worth it." "I taught you that. You taught me without speaking. You taught me by living." Alice, at 13, still didn't know what she wanted to do, but she loved the land, the plants, the animals. "I think I'll be an agronomist," she would say. "I'll make this land produce even more." Watching her children grow up with strong values, with a sense of justice, with love for the community, was Sarah's greatest victory. "You did a good job," Mrs. Eleanor said. "We did. You, Thomas, Joseph, the whole community. They're the result of all of us." It was around that time that Ryan, the cousin who had tried to steal the inheritance, reappeared. He had spent years away, trying to rebuild his life somewhere else. He showed up at the ranch one day, visibly ashamed. "I don't know if you'll welcome me," he said. Sarah looked at the man who had caused her so much suffering. He was older, thinner, with tired eyes. "What do you want?" "To ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I know I was terrible to you. But I spent these years thinking about everything I did, and I need to at least try to redeem myself." Sarah felt anger rise, but also something else, compassion. Ryan had lost everything because of greed. She had gained everything by doing the right thing. In a way, fate had already taken care of justice. "I don't know if I can fully forgive you," she said honestly. "You tried to destroy me. You tried to steal not just the inheritance, but the dignity of many families. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life regretting it. But I won't carry hatred either. I've already carried too much weight in life. I don't want to add more." It wasn't complete forgiveness, but it was a start. Ryan didn't stay at the ranch, didn't become part of the community. But Sarah allowed him to visit occasionally, to see what the place he had tried to steal had become. "Why did you let him come back?" Thomas asked. "Because holding a grudge only hurts the one holding it, and because maybe seeing what he lost is punishment enough." Time kept passing. Arthur went off to college to study law. Alice decided to study agronomy, just as she had said. The kids were growing up, becoming adults. For Sarah, it was a hard adjustment. Suddenly, the house felt emptier. The children would visit on weekends, but it wasn't the same. "Empty nest syndrome," Mrs. Eleanor diagnosed. "Everyone goes through it. But I didn't want them to leave. Neither did they, but that's how it works. We raise our children to fly, not to stay." Sarah used her free time to devote herself more to other projects. She started writing about her experience, documenting everything for future generations. It was during this period that she began the book that would eventually be published, focusing not on the legal battles, but on the people. "Why are you writing this?" Arthur asked during a visit. "Because memories fade. People die, but written stories remain. I want someone 50 years from now to be able to read and understand what really happened." The book took 3 years to write. Sarah revisited every moment, every decision, every person who had been part of the journey. It was a painful process at times, remembering the struggles, the moments of despair. But it was also cathartic, allowing her to process everything she had lived through. When she finally finished, she had a manuscript of over 500 pages. It was honest, raw, but also hopeful. "It's good," Thomas said after reading it. "Really good. You should publish it." Who's going to want to read about a land dispute in the countryside? People who want to read about justice, about perseverance, about not giving up. A lot of people. Thomas was right. A small publisher showed interest. The book was published, and to Sarah's surprise, became a moderate success. It wasn't a national bestseller, but it sold well. More importantly, it landed in the right hands. Activists, lawyers, people fighting their own battles. Sarah began receiving letters, many letters, from people who had read it and felt inspired, who had decided not to give up on their own causes. "You've touched more lives than you realize," Mrs. Eleanor said, looking at the pile of letters. "It wasn't me, it was the story. I was just lucky to be part of it." Mr. Stephen, now retired but still keeping up with cases from afar, also wrote a book. His was more technical, focused on the legal aspects of the case. Together, the 2 books formed a complete portrait, the human and the legal, the emotion and the reason. "We made a good team," he told Sarah at the launch. "We did, and we still do." Joseph, who was growing increasingly frail, asked Sarah to read the book to him. "My eyes aren't as good as they used to be." She read chapters to him every day. Joseph would listen, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying, always commenting. "Do you remember when you almost gave up that stormy night?" "I remember. If you hadn't shown up the next day, I would have left." "But you didn't. And look at everything you built." A week after they finished the book, Joseph passed away during the night. He simply didn't wake up. The funeral was massive, with people from all over the region coming to pay their respects. Joseph had become a father figure to many, not just to Sarah. He lived to see it all, Sarah said at the funeral. He saw justice done. He saw the community thrive. He saw the children grow up. Few people have that luck. But the pain was deep. Joseph had been her first ally, her constant friend, her wise counselor. "He loved you like a daughter," Mrs. Eleanor said, "and you were the daughter he never had." The ranch felt emptier without Joseph, but his presence remained there in every corner, in every tree he had helped plant, in every story he had told. Arthur, who was in his final year of law school, came running back for the funeral. "Grandpa Joseph taught me so much," he said, crying. "About the land, about people, about not giving up." "And he would be proud of you," Sarah said, "of who you're becoming." Alice was also devastated. Joseph had been her constant companion in her studies of the land. "He taught me that land isn't just soil," she said. "It's history, it's people, it's the future." The two siblings promised to honor Joseph's memory by continuing the work he had helped start. Mrs. Eleanor was growing frailer too. At 85, she had trouble walking, her memory failing at times. Sarah brought her to live at the ranch permanently, in a small but comfortable house. "You don't have to do this," Mrs. Eleanor protested. "Yes, I do. You took care of me when I had no one. Now it's my turn to take care of you." Mrs. Eleanor's last years were peaceful. She spent her days on the porch receiving visitors, telling stories to her great-grandchildren, Sarah's grandchildren. "I had a good life," she would often say. "I met incredible people. I was part of something important. When Mrs. Eleanor passed away at 90 years old, Sarah was by her side, holding her hand. "Thank you," Mrs. Eleanor whispered, "for letting me be part of all this. Thank you for taking me in when I had nothing." Those were the last words they exchanged. Mrs. Eleanor closed her eyes and left peacefully. Once again the ranch was in mourning. First Joseph, now Mrs. Eleanor. The older generations were passing, handing the torch to the new ones. "It's the cycle of life," Thomas said, comforting Sarah. "They lived well. They saw everything they helped build. Now it's our turn to carry on." Mr. Stephen was also growing frailer. At 90 years old, he still had a sharp mind, but his body was giving out. Sarah visited him regularly, bringing news from the ranch, updating him on the cases Arthur was starting to take on. "Your son is going to be a better lawyer than me," he said one day. "Impossible. You're the best." "No, I had to learn by doing, by making mistakes. He's learning from my successes and my mistakes. He's going to start from a higher level." Arthur had graduated at the top of his class and was already working on social injustice cases, following exactly in Mr. Stephen's footsteps. Alice had returned to the region after graduating and was implementing innovative, sustainable agriculture techniques at the ranch and on neighboring properties. "Our children turned out incredible," Thomas said with pride. "They did, but the credit isn't ours. It's theirs." "It's ours too. We set the example. We showed them how to live with integrity." It was true. Sarah and Thomas weren't perfect parents. No one is. But they had given their best, and their children were proof that it had been worth it. When Sarah was 60 years old, she received an unexpected invitation. A major university in the state capital wanted to give her an honorary doctorate in social sciences. "I didn't even finish college," she protested. "You don't need to. This is recognition for what you've done in practice, for the community you built, for the justice you achieved." Sarah accepted, but with conditions. "I don't want only me being honored. I want Joseph, Mrs. Eleanor, and Mr. Stephen included. Without them, none of this would exist." The university agreed. They held a special ceremony honoring everyone who had been fundamental to the struggle. Mr. Stephen was there, in a wheelchair, but with the brightest smile. They made a video memorial for Joseph and Mrs. Eleanor. When Sarah stepped up to receive her diploma, the auditorium rose to a standing ovation. She looked at Thomas, at her children, at the community that had come to support her, and felt deep gratitude. In her thank you speech, she said, "I don't deserve this award any more than the hundreds of other people who fight every day for justice and are never recognized. I accept it on behalf of all of them, on behalf of all who refuse to accept injustice, who keep fighting even when it seems impossible, who keep believing even when everyone says to give up." They were simple but powerful words. Many in the audience cried. After the ceremony, several young people approached her. "So you inspired me to study law. Your story made me want to work with communities. Because of you, I decided not to give up on my case." Sarah listened to each one, offering words of encouragement, sharing contacts, doing what she could to help. "Do you get tired?" Thomas asked on the way back. "Sometimes, but it also energizes me, seeing that the story can make a difference in other people's lives." They returned to the ranch, and Sarah went back to her routine. At 60, she didn't work with the same intensity as decades before, but she was still active. She gave consultations to other communities facing similar problems. She helped Arthur with complex cases. She guided Alice in her agricultural projects. It was a full life, full of purpose. When Arthur announced he was going to get married, Sarah cried tears of joy. "My baby has grown up. Mom, I'm 30 years old. To me, you'll always be my baby." The wedding was at the ranch, of course. A beautiful, simple ceremony full of love. Watching her son swear eternal love brought back memories of when she and Thomas had gotten married. It seemed like yesterday, but it had been over 30 years. "Time flies," she commented to Thomas. "It does. But they were good years. They were the best." Alice also got married 2 years later. Her husband was an environmental engineer who shared her passion for the land. "You two are going to make a great team," Sarah told her daughter. "Like you and Dad? Even better. You're starting with less baggage, fewer problems, but also with less experience. Experience comes, the love you already have." The first grandchildren were born. Arthur had a girl whom they named Eleanor in honor of Mrs. Eleanor. Alice had a boy named Joseph in honor of Joseph. Sarah became a grandmother at 65. It was a role she loved. "Grandma, tell the story of when you first came here," little Eleanor would ask. "Again? I've already told it 1,000 times. Tell it one more time." And Sarah would tell it, always with the same emotion, always making her granddaughter's eyes shine. Mr. Stephen passed away at 92. Sarah was by his side. "You gave me hope when I had none," she said. "And you gave me the most important case of my career," he replied with a weak voice. "Thank you for trusting me. I will always trust you, wherever you are." Those were his last words before he passed. Sarah cried a lot, but she was also at peace. Mr. Stephen had lived a long life, full of meaning. The funeral was enormous. Lawyers from all over the country came. The tribute was well-deserved for a man who had dedicated his life to justice. Arthur promised to continue the legacy. "I'm going to take on impossible cases like he did." "But choose wisely," Sarah advised. "Not everything that seems impossible is worth it. Choose causes that matter." The years kept passing. Sarah was 70 when she realized she was finally at peace. It didn't mean there were no more struggles, there always were. But she had learned to choose her battles more wisely, to delegate more, to trust that the community would go on without her needing to control everything. "You seem lighter," Thomas observed. "I do feel lighter. I carried so much weight for so long. It's time to share the load." "Or to let go of it completely?" "No, never completely. But I no longer need to carry it alone." It was a lesson that had taken decades to learn. Little Eleanor grew up hearing stories about the great-grandmother whose name she carried, about the struggle, about the courage, about never giving up. At 8 years old, she asked, "Grandma, are you afraid of death?" The question caught Sarah off guard, but she answered honestly, "No, sweetheart. I've lived a full life. I did what I came here to do. When my time comes, I'll go in peace. But you're important. If you die, who's going to take care of everything? Nothing depends on just one person, Eleanor. When I first arrived here, I thought I had to do everything alone. But I learned that strength lies in the community. When I'm no longer here, you'll carry on. And your children. And their children. Is that what a legacy is? Exactly. A legacy isn't having your name on a plaque. It's planting seeds that keep growing long after you're gone. The conversation stayed with Sarah. It made her think about what she truly wanted to leave behind. She decided to do something she had been putting off. Document absolutely everything. Every important document, every story, every lesson learned. She spent the next few years doing exactly that. She created a complete archive at the ranch with digital and physical copies of everything. Why so much work? Thomas asked. So that the truth never gets lost. So that 100 years from now someone can know exactly what happened. It was meticulous work. Eleanor, the granddaughter, helped, fascinated by every story, every document. Grandma, this could be a museum. Maybe one day it will be. And it was. Years after Sarah's death, the family turned part of the ranch into a small community museum, telling the story of the region and the fight for the land. But that was still in the future. In the present, Sarah was 75 years old, in good health, enjoying her grandchildren and watching the community thrive. One day she received a letter from Julia, the young woman she had met at the university years ago. Dear Sarah, I'm writing to thank you again. Because of your inspiration, I managed to recover my family's land. It was an 8-year fight, but worth every second. Now we're building a cooperative just like yours. You planted one more seed, and it's growing strong. With eternal gratitude, Julia, Sarah cried, reading the letter. It was confirmation that her work had gone beyond the ranch, beyond the region. It was inspiring a movement. You changed the world, Thomas said. I didn't change the world. I changed a small corner of it, and other people are changing other corners. Together, maybe we can achieve something greater. That's how Sarah saw it, not as a solitary heroine, but as part of a larger movement of people fighting for justice. When she turned 80, the community organized a huge celebration. People came from all over the country, people she had helped directly or indirectly over the years. 80 years, she said in her speech. Who would have thought I'd live to see this? And who would have thought I'd live so well, surrounded by so much love? The applause went on for a long time, but Sarah was tired. 80 years weigh on you, no matter how well lived. She began to slow down even more. She spent more time resting, less time in meetings and events. It's time, she said to Thomas. It's time to truly let go. Are you sure? I am. I fought my whole life. Now I just want to live what's left in peace. And that's what she did. Sarah's last years were peaceful. She spent her days with Thomas, with her grandchildren, reading, resting. She didn't completely stop getting involved. She still gave advice when asked. She still took part in important decisions, but she was no longer the leader. She was the advisor. How do you know when it's time to pass the torch? Someone asked. When you realize the next generation can do just as well or better than you, and when you realize that holding on to the torch is keeping them from growing. Arthur had become a renowned lawyer, specializing in community causes. Alice was revolutionizing sustainable agriculture across the entire region. They've surpassed us, Sarah said to Thomas with pride. They haven't surpassed us. They built on top of what we left behind. That's different. It's better. Thomas was growing frail too. At 85, he had increasing health problems. I'm tired, he confessed to Sarah in private moments. Me too. But it was a good life, wasn't it? The best. Any regrets? Sarah thought. A few. There always are. Things I could have done differently. But overall, no, I did the best I could with what I had. That's all anyone can do. Thomas had a mild stroke. He recovered, but he grew frailer. He started using a wheelchair. I hate this, he complained. But you're alive. That's what matters. For how long? For as long as we have, and we're going to enjoy every second. And they did. Even with the limitations, they found joy in the small moments. A beautiful sunset, a visit from the grandchildren, a deep conversation. You know I love you, right? Thomas said one day. I know. And you know I love you too? I know. I've always known. They sat in silence for a while, just holding hands, enjoying each other's company. When Sarah turned 85, she began writing letters to her grandchildren, not to be read now, but for when she was no longer there. In each letter, she shared life lessons, stories she hadn't told, advice she thought was important. For Eleanor, my dear granddaughter, you carry the name of a special woman, Mrs. Eleanor, who took me in when I had nothing. I hope you also have that generosity of spirit. Never let anyone tell you that you can't do something because you're a woman, or young, or any other excuse. I was just a young woman alone when I arrived here, and look at what I accomplished. Not because I was special, but because I refused to accept the limitations others tried to impose. With all my love, Grandma Sarah. For Joseph, the grandson. My dear Joseph, you carry the name of a great man who was my first ally and friend. Joseph had a quiet wisdom, a steady kindness. I hope you develop those qualities as well. Remember, being strong doesn't mean being hard. Being a leader doesn't mean being authoritarian. The most powerful people I ever knew were gentle, yet firm in their principles. With all my love, Grandma Sarah. She wrote letters to all the grandchildren, each one personalized, each one with specific messages. Thomas found her writing one day. Farewell letters? Not farewell, continuation. I want them to have something of mine to keep. They already do. They have your memories, your teachings, your example. But that can be lost over time. Written words remain. Thomas understood. He himself began writing his own letters. The two of them spent weeks on this task, sharing memories, laughing at old stories, sometimes crying. What an incredible journey, Thomas said when they finished. It was, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Sarah's health began to decline at 90. Nothing dramatic, just the natural wear and tear of nearly a full century of life. She spent more time in bed, less time on the porch. Visits tired her out faster. Mum, you need to rest more, Arthur insisted. I'll rest soon enough forever. While I can, I want to live. She was stubborn to the end. At 93, Sarah asked to be taken to the porch one last time. They wanted to wait, but she insisted. This might be the last time I see this, she said. They took her in the wheelchair. It was a full moon night, and the ranch was bathed in silver light. It's so beautiful, she whispered. It is, Mum, Alice said, tears in her eyes. When I first arrived here, it was nothing but destruction. Look what it's become. You did this. We did. All of us. Sarah stayed there for hours, simply looking, absorbing every detail to carry with her wherever she was going. She saw the lit houses. She heard distant laughter. She smelled the earth after a recent rain. It's time to go back, Mum, Arthur said gently. One more moment. Just one more. Finally, she agreed to go back. That night she slept deeply. And in the morning, Thomas found her like that with a peaceful smile on her face. Sarah Mitchell had passed away in peace after a long and full life. The funeral was historic. Thousands of people came. There were 3 generations of families she had helped. There were lawyers inspired by her case. There were activists following in her footsteps. There were students studying her story. Arthur gave the main speech, his voice choked with emotion. My mother always said she wasn't a heroine, that she was just a person who refused to accept injustice. But to us, she was so much more. She was proof that one person can change the world. Alice added, she taught us that inheritance isn't about money or land. It's about values, about justice, about doing what's right. That's the inheritance she left. Eleanor, the granddaughter, read an excerpt from the letter her great-great-grandfather Arthur had left so many years ago. The only inheritance truly worth leaving is the truth. Grandma left much more than truth. She left hope. They buried Sarah at the ranch, next to where Joseph and Mrs. Eleanor already were. On the headstone, Sarah Mitchell, 1995-2090. She refused the easy money and chose the difficult truth, and she changed everything. Thomas survived only 2 years without her. When he passed away, he was buried by her side as he had asked. Life went on. Arthur and Alice kept the ranch running. The grandchildren grew up hearing stories about their great-grandmother, the great-grandchildren too. 100 years after Sarah first arrived at the ranch, the community held a celebration. The place was unrecognizable compared to that abandoned plot of land. It was prosperous, vibrant, full of life, a model of sustainable community. And at the center of it all, the memorial. Not just for Sarah, but for everyone who had fought. Joseph, Mrs. Eleanor, Mr. Stephen, Gerald, and so many others. A great-great-grandson of Sarah, named Arthur in honor of his great-grandfather, looked at the old photographs. Was it all real? He asked his father. Did all of this really happen? It happened, and it's documented. Every part of it. Was she brave? The bravest. But she also had fear, doubts. She was human, and that's exactly why she succeeded. Because she fought despite the fear, not without it. The boy looked at the ranch thriving around him. And will it last? Everything she built? It will last as long as we remember, as long as we honor the values she stood for, as long as we keep fighting for justice, for truth, for community, then it will last forever. If it's up to us, yes. And so it was. Sarah's story wasn't just about a woman who had fought for her inheritance. It was about what we do with the opportunities life gives us. She could have accepted those $5,000 on the first day and walked away. It would have been easier. It would have spared her years of struggle and suffering. But she would have lost everything that truly mattered: the community, the purpose, the certainty that she had made a difference. The ranch continued to be a symbol of hope for generations, proof that one person, a single person with courage and determination, can change not only their own destiny, but that of hundreds of others. And the lesson remained: true inheritance is not what you receive, but what you do with it. It's not about accumulating, it's about building. It's not about you, it's about everyone. Sarah had received an abandoned ranch and a box of old documents, and she turned that into a legacy that would touch generations. Not because she was special, not because she had unique skills, but simply because she refused to give up, because she chose the hard path instead of the easy one, because she believed the truth deserved to be defended, and in the end that choice made all the difference. End of the story. This was a fictional story created to touch our hearts. Now tell us what you thought. Do you believe Sarah made the right choices by refusing the easy money? Leave your opinion in the comments with sincere words. If this story touched you, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other emotional stories.